I'm actually in Cheltenham, just up the M5 from you, for a few days looking after my mum. But anyway, it's lovely to be with you. I'm Tim GW4VXE. Um, I write a bit for Practical Wireless and sometimes for Ragcom. Lucky enough to do that. And this evening, I'm going to talk a bit about satellite operation, with the emphasis on simple satellite operating. We'll go towards the end with some slightly more complicated stuff, but the idea really is to get you started if you haven't played around with amateur radio satellites before. Tell you a little bit about how to get going, and hopefully inspire you to have a bit of a play. I hope this is all working. If it stops working at any point, Mike, would you send me a messenger message or something? That would be great. So the emphasis this evening is going to be on simple satellite operating. It doesn't need to be complicated, but I think it's often seen that way. I remember watching one of the RSGB conventions probably 2 or 3 years ago when they were doing Vox Pop sort of interviews from the bar, and there was this lovely lady came on. She was just getting licensed and enjoying her first QSOs, and she said, and what I'd really like to do is try some satellite operating. And I thought, crumbs, she made it sound like it was a real sort of nirvana and something very complicated to do, and it's really not. And I hope I can convey that to you this evening. As I put in the first point, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to do this stuff, and you don't have to have complicated elevation systems and computer control and all that stuff, which is, I think, what I thought you had to do when I first started playing around with satellites. I'd seen all these pictures of antenna systems with azimuth and elevation systems, and all controlled and so on. And it's brilliant fun to put one of those together, but you absolutely don't need to have that. There's some much more manual solutions that we can talk about, that will work really well for you. So we'll start simple, and then move along to some more complicated stuff in a little while. Well, way back when in the 1980s, Mike and I were talking about when we sort of first started talking to people and so on. And I think I was first licensed in 1983 as a G6, and at that time, as some of you all perhaps remember, a G6 was a Class B licensee, so you could use 2 meters and above, so you couldn't go on HF. But satellites were a great way of starting to work some DX, and around at that time there were some Russian satellites, the RS satellites, and they were on 2 meters up and 10 meters down. And I first, and of course, that was a brilliant way to make some DX contacts for somebody who only had 2 meters and above. And we had a dispensation, by the way, to use the RS satellites coming out on 10 meters. That was completely legit. So I played around with that a bit before I got my G4 call, and that was brilliant fun. I worked some nice DX. I remember working a guy up in Greenland and a guy down in the Ivory Coast, and you get the occasional QSOs across the pond into the States. So that was really good fun. And then of course I got my G4, and you start playing with HF and all that stuff. And I forgot about satellites for probably 30 years or something like that. And then in sort of quite the early days of Twitter, Pete 2E0SQL, who's just changed his call sign to MM9SQL, he put some pictures up of him playing on satellites using no more than an FT817 and a portable handheld Yagi. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. That might be quite fun to do. And I really like the idea that you could make your contacts from wherever you are. So I started thinking, well, maybe I should give this a go. And to start with, all I did found out where one of the satellites would transmit, and just got a simple I think it was a Baofeng handheld or something like that. Took the squelch off, listened on the nominal frequency, and as the satellite was going over, I think it was SO50, which isn't one of the strongest, say. But as it was just going over, I got a voices and things. You need a full duplex rig. So that's something that you can listen on the receiver at the same time as you're transmitting. Well, the unfortunate thing is that there's very few full duplex handhelds about these days. The Kenwood THD72 was the last one that Kenwood made. I don't think that Yaesu or Icom make a full duplex handheld at the moment. And I've been saying at these talks for a while that there are no full duplex handhelds around, and somebody rose out of the audience a little while ago and said actually one of the Wuxen handhelds, I think it's the UV9 or something like that, he reckoned that was full duplex. I think I've read something that it isn't entirely full duplex, but anyway, if you've got one, it might be worth a play. Why is full duplex good? Well, if you try and transmit and you're not getting through the satellite, you might as well, you can hear you're not getting through the satellite, you might as well let the PTT go, and then you're not causing interference or whatever. And if you hear that you are getting through, then it just gives you a little bit more feedback as to what's going on the satellite. Having said all that, full duplex is definitely something that you should strive for if you can. But as I've described, if you're using a handheld, it's unless you've got a THD72, it's not going to be straightforward for you to do that. So you might have to use a half duplex handheld, and the world will not end. It will work sometimes. But another possibility for you is to use one of the dual band mobiles. I've listed one or two there, a bit Yaesu centric, I guess. But FT 8800, 8900, or the FTM 400s or 500s, whatever you've got. Though those are full duplex, and I know Kenwood and Icom have got some similar mobiles. Just be mindful, because I think pretty much all of those are 50 watt, can produce 50 watts output. You don't need to put 50 watts output into the satellite, but between 10 and 20 watts will get you through really, really solidly. So you don't need to do any more than that. As I've said there, a cheap Baofeng will suffice to start. You'll be able to hear the satellites quite well, the FM satellites, and they're not ideal for transmitting on, but you'll certainly be able to make some nice QSOs. Or as I put at the bottom, a proper satellite rig like a IC 9700 if you've got one, or looking back a bit further, an FT847, and I think Icom had some quite nice dual banders back in the 90s, which sometimes come up on the second-hand market. So that might be a possibility for you as well. So a few rigs there that you can try using. Now, something I need to talk about a little bit is Doppler shift, and I'm sure you're all familiar with Doppler shift when you hear an emergency vehicle coming towards you and all that stuff. And I'm sure many of you understand that Doppler shift applies to RF as well. So if you've got a satellite coming towards you at, what is it, 17,500 miles an hour, that's the speed of the International Space Station, then it does cause a bit of Doppler shift. Not very much on 2 meters. It's a kc or so. So to be honest, you won't notice that. The rig will grab the automatic frequency control, if you like, and it'll be able to receive that on 2 meters on the nominal frequency. But on 70 SEMS, things are different. The Doppler shift is much higher. So if the satellite is coming straight towards you, for example, as it comes over the horizon, it'll appear about 10 kilohertz high of where you might expect it to be. And as it gets closer to you, that frequency will drop a little bit. As it comes over the top of you, it'll be on the nominal frequency, and then as it goes away from you, that frequency will drop, and you'll lose it again if it's going straight away from you, about 10 kilohertz low of the nominal frequency. So what I do to deal with that, you think, well, crumbs, how am I going to deal with that? But it's dead easy. So if you've got a satellite SO50, which oh, crumbs, I can't immediately remember the downlink frequency, 436-800, I think. We'll go with 436-800. And so what I do is I set up about 5 memories. So the first memory that I would use when it's coming towards me from the horizon is on 436-810, and then one at 436-805, the nominal frequency 436-800, another one 436-795, and then the final one as it's heading off to the east on 436-790. And with a lot of the handhelds, particularly things like Baofengs and so on, you can set up 5 memories like that. But what you can, not only can you set up the receive frequencies, but you can set the transmit frequency on 2 meters. So you just flick through from one memory to another, and instinctively when to change from one memory to another, because you realize it's just starting to get a little bit distorted, and you flick to the other memory and it's nice and clear. So that's kind of how the Doppler shift works on FM satellites. So it sounds like it's going to be alarming, but actually it's really simple to deal with. But yeah, set up something like 5 different memories, and that will work very well. All right, so I did talk a little bit about SO50, which is also known by the name of Saudi Sat. You'll be surprised to hear, therefore, that it was launched in 2002 by a group from Saudi Arabia. It's still going. 23 years later, they built satellites to last in those days. We'll talk a bit about that in a bit more in a second. But it's still going. It's got a 145-850 uplink, and the downlink is on 436-795. I wasn't far off, was I? A bit like your local repeater, you need a CTCSS tone to get through it. The tone is 67 hertz. I've also put on the slide that there's a 74.4 hertz to arm the timer. What's that about? Well, if it hasn't heard any activity for I think it's 10 minutes, then it shuts the transmitter off and saves the battery. So that's cool. So of course, if the satellites come over the Atlantic, it takes just over 10 minutes to cross the Atlantic, or at least a little bit less to cross the Atlantic. But bits of Canada are quite quiet as well. So if it hasn't heard any activity in 10 minutes, it'll shut the transmitter off. So you might sometimes be looking at your past predictions, think I should be able to hear SO now, why can't I? And that's because the satellite has switched its transmitter off. So if you give it a quick blip on 145-850 with a 74.4 hertz tone, that'll wake it up. And the satellite orbits about every 100 minutes. It's at a height that you can just about make a QSO across the Atlantic. It's touch and go to do that, but it's certainly a very good satellite to make QSOs around Europe, and out to the east into Ukraine, and I think I've worked to UA9 on SO50 in the past, so gives you an idea of the sort of range that you can get. So probably talked about quite a lot about that already. So yes, the satellite normally appears around 436-800 and then Dopplers down a little bit. we'll talk about how you know where the satellite is in the sky in a little while, but it's quite easy to follow it by hand. You know, this is what I was getting at a little bit earlier. You know, you don't need a azimuth elevation rotator to follow it across the sky. Although it's, you know, lovely if you've got one, that's great. But you can actually use use a handheld Yagi and just, you know, wave it around a little bit and see where you get the best signal. That's what I've always done, and it works quite well. One little trick, in if you can imagine, you know, the satellite coming across, and the aerial, it may be that the satellite is twisting and turning, and of course the angle with relation to the ground will change as it moves through the pass. So it is actually worth, not only is it worth sort of following the satellite across the sky, but give the aerial a twist in terms of horizontal and vertical polarization, and you'll find that through the pass, the that polarization will change. So give it a bit of a tweak, find out where it's strongest, and stick with that for a few moments, and then, you know, as it starts to get a bit choppy again, just give it another tweak, and you'll find it's moved round again. um and just there I said, you know, try and find somewhere with a low horizon. I know when I was first playing with SO50, I was living in Oxfordshire, and we had lots of buildings and trees around us, and I didn't really see the satellite until it was about 20 degrees above the horizon. Well, since moving to West Wales, where, you know, we look out towards the sea is our western horizon. There's an awful lot happening on a satellite pass. So just as it comes up over the horizon and so on, you can work some nice DX. So if you can find somewhere with a nice low horizon, either to the west or out to the east, SO50 is probably particularly good to the east. It's a little bit more touch and go, I suppose, to the west, although you can certainly work one or two of the Americans. But yeah, it makes a real difference if you've got a low horizon. So that's well worth a go, and not just for SO50, for any satellite there. What other FM satellites are there? AO91, I've said, is a great satellite. It's it's not that well. Its batteries are a bit kaput. So it sometimes appears when it's had a good bit of sun on the solar panels, and that's a really good satellite. It's one I particularly enjoy because it's just a little bit higher than the other ones, so the range on it is a little bit greater. So you could, when the satellite was at apogee on the North American path, you could work well into the US and Canada. I think I didn't work a VE4, but I've certainly heard a Victor Echo 4 on that satellite. So that's, you know, a fair way across. But keep an eye on the AMSAT status page, amsat.org/status, and that allows people to report when they hear particular satellites, and whether they were working, or whether they were just in beacon mode, or they didn't hear anything at all from them. So have a look on that. Keep an eye on when AO91 is heard, and perhaps give that a go. I particularly like that one because when it is working well, its downlink is on 2 meters, and it's a nice strong signal even with slightly dodgy batteries. So and the uplinks on 70 sems. So yeah, really good satellite to play with, and it does work sometimes. The International Space Station, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but there's plenty of stuff going on with the ISS, from an amateur radio point of view that you can play with, and that's always good fun. The other satellite I was going to mention, Oscar 123. That's a 2 meter uplink and 70 cents down. That's a reasonably strong signal, and that's now in continuous service. So have a look at the frequencies. I mean, you've got the frequencies there, but have a look for passes of that, and perhaps have a listen and see how you get on. Well, one of the things that's obviously very important with satellite operating is you need to know when the satellites are coming over. These are all low Earth orbit satellites, so they don't. It's not like your TV satellite or QO100 that we'll talk about in a little while. It doesn't stay at the same place over the equator. They're passing over all the time. So you need to know when the satellite's going to be passing over. Loads of programs to do that. I've listed a few. GPredict there, that will run on Windows or Linux. You can run it on a Raspberry Pi. Looks quite good in the shack. Actually, I think some of these dashboard things. What is it, Ham Clock or whatever? I have a feeling they show satellite predictions. I must admit, I've not really looked to that, but that might be a possibility. There's a really nice bit of software for Windows called SAT PC32, which not only does past predictions and things, but it will actually control your radio. And manage all the Doppler shift, and as you tune up and down, it'll automatically compensate the Doppler. It's very clever. Yeah, it is a paid bit of software, but you can use it in evaluation mode if to find out whether you like it or not. So that's worth a look if you're establishing a sort of home station or whatever. But what I must admit, what I use if I'm out and about with a handheld and a handheld Yargi, I use something on my phone. I'm a iOS user, so I use GoSat Watch. I think it might be a £5, or so it might be a little bit more these days. I'm not sure. But there's various free satellite prediction programs for both iOS and Android. AMSAT Droid is one I've listed there. I think ISS Detector is another, which works for both 2 meters. For both iOS and Android. And I've listed there satmatch.com, which is written by Justin K5EM. And that's quite nice because it helps you work out the mutual footprint. So say there's somebody in a nice square in the US that you want to try and work on a particular satellite. You tap in their locator and their height above sea level, and your locator and your height above sea level, the satellite that you'd like to use, and it'll work out when you have a mutual footprint. So that's quite a nice little bit of software. The next slide I put in, I was chatting with Mike the other day, and he said that he discovered the Skyroof software, and it's definitely worth mentioning. A very interesting bit of software written by V3NEA, who's written lots of good stuff in the past. And what this does is it combines satellite predictions, if you can see down the left-hand side of the screen, all the different satellites, and it'll tell you the upcoming passes and so on. But you can also connect it up to your SDR, so something like your IC9700 or a SDR play box or something like that, and it will actually show you and allow you to tune. You can see the spectrum, the waterfall, and you can actually sort of move up and down and change frequency and have a listen and so on. So that's some very interesting software, and I must admit I haven't really played with it very much at this stage, but it does look really good, and I've seen quite a few people mentioning it. And that screen in front of you, you can see the sort of Doppler curves of the satellites and so on, which I think is quite interesting. So yeah, have a look at Skyroof. It's an interesting bit of software and does all sorts of good stuff. And particularly if you just want to um, perhaps use something like an RTL STR dongle, which you can get for really low cost. Connect that up to something as simple as a white stick vertical, and you could make this software go. So it could be a really good introduction to satellite operation, and there's a nice lights there. So it'll give you plenty of idea of the different satellites that are coming over and things to listen for. So I think that could be a really nice project. So thanks, Mike, for mentioning that the other day. I hope people have some fun with it. All right, a little bit more about the International Space Station. As I said, there's quite a lot going on. I'm sure many of you will be familiar with the occasional voice activity on 145-800. You've probably listened to some of the what I'm going to call schools contacts. I think there was one with the Scouts, wasn't there, back over the weekend? So this sort of format of this, if you're not familiar with it, is that generally some youngsters ask the astronauts some questions, and you can hear the astronaut giving answers to the questions, and so all sorts of good questions get asked. It's quite interesting to listen to. And generally, the signal on 145-800 is really, really strong. So you genuinely need no more than a handheld to listen, unless it's very low on the horizon. But you'll probably do quite well with a white stick vertical for at least some of the pass. What else on from the International Space Station? Well, there's a APRS packet digipeater on 145825. If any of you have played with APRS terrestrially, why is that difficult to say this evening? But you can just amend the path on your APRS rig to have RS0ISS or ARISS in the path, rather than Y21 or whatever it is that you might use terrestrially. And you can send a packet, and hopefully your packet will the digipeater on the space station and repeated back all over Europe and so on. So that can be quite fun, and so you can send a beacon out that way and see how far you're heard, and you can have some quick fire text QSOs if you're handy on the keyboards as well, and that can be quite fun to do. There's also a crossband repeater on the space station. That's 2 meters up, 145,990, and again you need a 67 hertz tone, and comes down on a nominal frequency of 437,800. So remember, when it first comes over the horizon, if it's heading towards you, it'll be about 437,810, and just gradually go down in frequency. That crossband repeater does tend to get a bit busy. It's not the very best example of satellite operation I could point you at. There's a lot of calling over each other and so on. But you can you like me are quite lucky in that you're quite well west in the country. So if you've got a clear path out to the west, you might well see the space station as it's coming over the Atlantic. So there's not too much interference. And you can potentially make some QSOs before it comes in range of Central Europe, and it gets very, very busy. And again, it can be quite fun to play around at night when things are a little bit quieter. So yeah, well worth a listen. go on to some non-amateur frequencies now, but still quite interesting to be aware of. 143625, that tends to be used. If you understand Russian, then that's a good frequency to listen to. You'll hear conversations going on between the space station and ground control at Star City in Moscow. Very big signal, so that's worth a listen. During spacewalks, there's a couple of frequencies which are actually in the aircraft band, although unusually for the aircraft band, they're FM transmissions rather than AM. So the ISS uses 130.167, and the spacesuits of the astronauts are on 121275 and 121200. And in case you think, oh well, there's no chance I'm just going to hear somebody in the spacesuit, just imagine that there's not a lot in between you on the ground and the astronaut who's passing above you. So it's surprising. The signals can be quite strong from the spacesuits. So do have a listen to that. I'll show you some pictures of this in a little while, but there seem to be very frequent slow scan television events from the space station, and I think the Russians are particularly fond of this. A bunch of pictures on generally on 145800 on 145800 slow scan, and if you read slow scan, and if you receive a number of the pictures, you can apply for an award. And I think a lot of people, they generally send a series of, I don't know, 12 pictures or something like that, and people like to try and receive all 12 of the images. And bear in mind that on a single pass you probably get 2 and a bit images if you're lucky, so you have to listen over several passes, perhaps over a couple of days, to try and get the whole set of the pictures. And something which has been kicking around for a while, but has only just been switched back on, is ham TV. And this is actually live pictures from the International Space Station. I think it comes down. I've forgotten. I think it comes down on 13 SEMS, but I might be wrong. But one or two people, some Dave M0GIW, who perhaps some of you know, Dave's out in Cyprus now, and Dave sent me a video recording of ham TV received over the weekend, and it showed some pictures of one of the astronauts sort of working in the space station and so on. So that's quite interesting too. So yeah, lots happening with the International Space Station. The APRS Digipeater, yeah, I've talked about that a little bit, but you can get through the APRS Digipeater with one of the handhelds. You've probably seen some of the handhelds, like the Kenwoods, the THD 75, the 74 and 72. I think they all do APRS. Certainly some of the things like the Yaesu FD2, 3 and 5, they all do APRS. So one of those, even with a excuse me, even one of those, even with a rubber duck, will sometimes get through the space station. But if you've got a slightly extended antenna, then you'll do even better, and that can be quite good fun. And you can set things up with your home station to send APRS messages as well. I've put some software down there, UISS by ON6MU, and then there's the UZ7HO sound card modem, and so you can use that as a sort of terminal and send messages. So that's quite good fun. The very simplest thing, if you just want to have a play around and you see if you can receive some some packets on a really cheap handheld, Quansheng or a Baofeng or something like that, and take the squelch off, stick your receiver on 145.825, and use a packet decoder on your phone. There's a couple around, and of course the names of them have deserted me at the moment. A Pulse modem, I think, is one of the ones for iOS. Anyway, there's several around. If you're interested and you can't find them, just send me an email, and I'll be happy to try and help you. But yeah, stick your receiver on 145.825 when the ISS is overhead. Hold your phone close to the speaker of the rig, and you should get some decodes. So what could be more simple than that? And that's quite encouraging and fun to get going. Few examples of SSTV pictures as received from the ISS. I think that was a fairly recent event. One or two pictures which I think Dave M0GIW received and kindly sent them to me. So that gives you an idea of what a decent SSTV picture can look like. All right. Well, I'm conscious I shouldn't talk for too long, but I reckon I've got probably just under 10 minutes. So I'm going to move very quickly to some slightly less simple satellites. So we've been talking up to now about FM satellites. So we'll just move on a little bit. So what I wanted to talk about first of all is linear transponders. Well, what's one of those? Well, what one of those is it's a satellite which has got a receiver which takes a chunk of a band, so it's probably going to be 10 or 20 kcs, receives that, picks it up, and spits it out on another band. And most of the linear transponders that we'll talk about are inverting. So it means that if you want to come out on USB, which you do, if you want to come on USB on the downlink, you have to transmit on lower sideband on the uplink, which is kind of fun. And the other sort of nature of the inverting part is that if you transmit at the lower end of the passband on the uplink, you'll come out on the upper end of the passband on the downlink. So it can be a bit of fun to try and find yourself, but we'll talk a little bit about how to do that in a second. The two satellites I probably recommend to you to play with, which give the best coverage, is the Russian RS-44 and Oscar 7. This will give you coverage, well over the US and well over into Asia as well. I'll show you a coverage map of some of the stuff that I've worked on RS-44 in a moment. AO7's got quite an interesting story. It was over 50 years ago now, and it was very successful for a year or two, and then the batteries went on it, and we didn't hear anything for quite a long while, and then gradually or suddenly people realized that they were starting to hear a sort of ghost signal from a Oscar 7 again. And what had happened was that the batteries had gone open circuit. But when the solar panels for the satellite were illuminated, there was just enough voltage to operate the transmitter and the receiver, of course. So just enough power to activate the satellite, and it was possible to use it once more. Now, the only thing about that is that you have to be really, really careful with Oscar 7, not to overload the receiver, because if you put such a big signal into the receiver, it it affects Oscar 7. So if you've got a beam or something like that, probably 5 watts or so will be enough to get into Oscar 7. So that can be so just something to be mindful of. You will need full duplex for either CWSSB or FT4 for these satellites. So you need to be able to listen perhaps on 2 meters when you're transmitting on 70 SEMS, or the other way round. Ideal to have 2 meters 70 SEMS beams. But once again, you don't need the azimuth elevation rotors. If you're somebody that likes playing on 2 meters 70 SEMS sideband or FT8 or something like that, and you've got horizontal beams, then that'll work absolutely fine for low passes. Up to about 10 degrees, you'll have enough vertical beam width on your horizontal Yagi to deal with at least 10 degrees. And that first 10 degrees is the most interesting anyway. So that's fine. And if you are interested, if you get interested in working these satellites, what you can always do is get a small beam, something like a 5 element or something like that, and just elevate it slightly a few degrees, and then you'll actually be able to follow it through much more of the pass. Something we talked a little bit about Doppler shift earlier on, and that's much more significant on the linear transponders. So you've got a whole passband to try and find yourself on. So if you're lucky and you've got a pan adapter or something like that on one of the 9700, send a string of dits, and with any luck, you can see those dits come up on the receiver, and you can immediately work out where to listen. But if you haven't got something like that, with a little bit of experience, you do work out where you're going to come out at different parts of the pass. And there's a spreadsheet. Can't immediately, I think it's a K0 or something like that, has put together a cheat sheet in Excel to tell you if you transmit on this frequency early on in the pass, you'll probably come out somewhere around here on receive. So that can be really helpful. FT4 is gaining popularity on linear transponders, so that's something that you might like to do, and it's possible to get that going in full duplex mode. Not something I've done, I must admit. I've certainly played around on CW quite a bit, and that gives you a bit of an example. That map, which I took out of my logging program, just gives you a rough idea of the big squares that I've been able to work on RS44, with about 10 or 20 watts to a vertical. Nothing more complicated than that. And as I said, earlier on, you have to be a little bit careful with vertical aerials. But for me, out on the west coast, I've got a nice low horizon, and it does work quite well. So you might well be successful, particularly if you're happy to play around on CW or FT4 as well. Would work quite well, I think. Just be careful not to overload the satellite, because even with a vertical and 15 watts, you've not got a great receive system there, but you can be quite loud into the satellite. So just be careful not to overload it. And to give you an idea, I worked a station in Cuba on RS44, and he was using a converted taxi FM rig. He was keying that, and on transmit, and he was using an RTL SDR dongle, whatever they are, 15 quid on receive to a small Yagi. So what pleasure to work somebody with that sort of system. All right, I'm conscious I'm running out of time a little bit, but just one more thing to mention, and then I'll leave you in peace. QO100, so that's a geostationary satellite, with some quite, and that hertz down and 13 centimeters up, and you think, oh crumbs, I haven't got those bands. How on earth do I get that going? But actually, it's simpler than you might imagine. The 10 gigahertz down you can probably use something like a Sky Dish, and there are various LNBs that, I mean, you can use a bog standard Sky LNB, and then feed that into an SDR receiver, an SDR play or a RTL SDR dongle again, and you'll find that the satellite will come out somewhere around 600 megahertz, and you can tune up and down the band and hear what's going on. So that works quite well. Various receive converters as well. And 13 centimeters up. Well, what you could do, you could use something like an add-on Pluto. I don't know if you've seen these tiny little units which give you receive and transmit between about 70 megs and 5 gigahertz. Really good fun to play with. You can listen to some microwave beacons and all that stuff's great fun. That's a whole other story. But you could use one of those and a Wi-Fi amp. Do use some filters because Pluto's a bit noisy, but use some filters, and that could be an uplink for you into a dish. And you can get 70 sems to 13 centimeters up converters. I think DX Patrol do one, which isn't horribly expensive. And yeah, we talked a little bit about the downlink. There is a SDR receiver at Goonhilly, and you can access that on the web, so you can actually go to that URL, and you can tune around on QO100, that's an easy way of receiving things. If you're trying things out, you could try your transmit out and hear yourself coming back through Goonhilly perhaps. Not only is there narrowband, CW sideband, bit of FT8, there's a wideband transponder as well, for television, and that can be quite popular. One of my friends here in Cheltenham, Graham G3VKV, uses that quite a lot. But a lot of DXpeditions use QO100, and some people have worked, I think around 200 countries on the satellite. I know Dave M0GIW's dad is licensed in Ireland, and he's worked probably 130, 140 countries just on CW on QO100. So if you're interested in collecting DX, then QO100 is quite a good place to be. And to give you an idea of what sort of coverage QO100 has got, that sort of gives you, so yeah, sort of out beyond India in the east, all through Africa, just grazing Brazil. You can just about get into it from Greenland. So that was very exciting, because that was a new continent for a lot of people, just from the southeastern corner of Greenland. And I think there have been some attempts to get into it from VO1, sort of Newfoundland, which is well out the coverage, but I think, yeah, that red line is 5 degrees. So I think in Newfoundland, it's literally just sort of above the horizon. But people have got some signals through it, so that can be quite interesting as well. So that's a really interesting satellite as well. All right, you'll be glad to know that's it. I said I'd talk for about 45 minutes, and I've gone slightly over, so sorry about that. But I hope you found it interesting. If you want to find out more about satellites, AMSAT UK is a great place to look at. They've got a good website. They've got a nice magazine which comes out several times a year, Oscar News. So that's well worth a look. I probably should have taken the X thing out. There used to be a really nice community of satellite operators on Twitter, and that's kind of fallen apart as Twitter's gone a bit nasty. But there is still some some interesting information on satellites there, and some people have moved over to Blue Sky, so you will find some AMSAT type tweets on Blue Sky as well. And if you're interested in QO100, have a look at the QO100 DX Club. That gives you plenty of information about what's going on QO100. All right, so that's it. What I did want to, if anybody would find the slides of any use or value, feel free to drop me an email and I can send you a PDF of the slides with the greatest of pleasure. I know it's not always the easiest thing to do to ask questions when you've got somebody remote, but I'll certainly be glad to have a go at answering any questions you have. So with that, thank you so much for listening. I hope it's been okay. I hope the technology was all okay in the end.